History tells us it remembers everything, but that's not entirely true. Because scattered across centuries, buried in sand, locked in stone, erased by fire, or hidden in plain sight, are mysteries so disturbing, so baffling, that even modern historians have been forced to admit something uncomfortable. They don't know the answer. Imagine ancient machines that shouldn't exist. Entire civilizations that vanished without a trace. Messages written in languages no one can read. Not then, not now. Events recorded by dozens of witnesses that simply shouldn't have happened. And here's the unsettling part. These aren't myths. They're not internet legends. They're documented, cataloged, debated in universities and archives around the world. Yet centuries later, the questions remain unanswered. Tonight, we're diving into 10 historical mysteries, moments where history breaks down, where logic falters, and where the past refuses to explain itself. Some of these mysteries suggest lost knowledge far ahead of its time. Others hint at decisions deliberately erased. And one of them, according to a single chilling record, may have changed human history forever without anyone realizing it. But before we begin, you need to understand why historians are often afraid to talk about these mysteries openly. Because once you pull on one thread, history starts unraveling. Welcome to this channel, a place where history isn't just told, it's interrogated. Here, we don't rush through dates and names. We slow down. We listen to what the past is really saying, and sometimes, to what it's refusing to say at all. Because history isn't a straight line. It's a crime scene. Every artifact is a clue. Every ancient text is a witness, often unreliable, sometimes silenced. And every missing answer raises a question that someone, somewhere, once tried to bury. In this episode, we're not chasing legends or myths. We're examining documented mysteries, events recorded by chroniclers, monks, engineers, generals, explorers, and scholars, who themselves admitted something didn't add up. These are the moments when historians stop speaking confidently, lower their voices, and say words like anomaly, unexplained, or still debated. And as you'll soon discover, many of these mysteries share an eerie pattern. They appear suddenly. They disrupt what we think we know. And then, just as suddenly, they vanish from the record. Which raises a disturbing question. Are these mysteries unsolved because we can't explain them? Or because the answers were never meant to survive? Let's go back, far back, to a world before modern science, to a time when the impossible was carved in stone. Because the first mystery begins thousands of years ago, with technology that shouldn't exist. To understand why some historical mysteries remain unsolved, even after centuries of study, we first need to understand how history itself is constructed and where it quietly breaks down. History, contrary to popular belief, is not a perfect record of the past. It's a survival story. Only a fraction of what once existed makes it to us. Most documents rot. Most buildings collapse. Most voices are never written down at all. What we call history is simply what survived long enough to be discovered, and what later generations decided was worth preserving. And that creates a dangerous illusion that the past was simpler than it really was. Because when something doesn't fit our expectations, when an artifact appears too advanced, a civilization vanishes too cleanly, or an event defies natural explanation, historians face a dilemma. Do they rewrite the framework? Or quietly label it an anomaly? And more often than they admit, they choose the second option. Take ancient technology, for example. For decades, historians believed that complex mechanical devices didn't exist before the medieval period. Ancient societies, they argued, were brilliant, but limited. No precision engineering. No advanced mathematics beyond basics. No machines. Then, in 1901, sponge divers off the coast of Greece pulled something from the sea that shattered that belief. A corroded lump of bronze, at first glance, nothing more than scrap, was later revealed to contain interlocking gears, precisely cut, arranged in a complexity not seen again for over 1,000 years. Today, we call it the Antikythera mechanism. It could predict eclipses, track planetary movement, model celestial cycles with shocking accuracy. And no one knows who built it, or why the knowledge disappeared. Historians still debate whether it represents a lost tradition of engineering, or a one-time genius never replicated. But that's the pattern you'll see again and again. Something appears. It shouldn't exist. And then, it vanishes. And the deeper we dig, the more uncomfortable the pattern becomes. Because technology isn't the only thing that goes missing. Entire civilizations do too. Across the world, archaeologists have uncovered cities that were carefully planned, densely populated and technologically impressive, only to be abandoned suddenly, without signs of invasion, famine, or natural disaster. No mass graves. No weapons. No final messages. Just empty streets. And silence. In some cases, the people didn't even take their valuables. Which raises a question historians struggle to answer honestly. What could force an entire society to walk away from everything at once? Climate change? Possibly, but the timelines don't always match. What? There are no bodies. Disease? Then where are the burial sites? So the explanation becomes vague. Gradual decline. Cultural transition. Unknown factors. Phrases that sound academic, but mean one thing. We don't know. And if civilizations can vanish without explanation, what about events that were witnessed, recorded, and still make no sense? Because the next mystery begins not in ancient ruins, but in written records, from people who swore they were telling the truth. If ancient ruins raise questions, written records are supposed to answer them. Ink on parchment. Stone inscriptions. Official chronicles. These are the backbone of historical certainty, the moments where historians feel safest saying, this is what happened. Until, suddenly, they don't. Because some of the most disturbing historical mysteries aren't missing records at all. They're records that exist, that were copied, preserved, and verified, and still describe events that make no sense. Let's start in the year 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, part of the Holy Roman Empire. One summer morning, a woman stepped into the street and began to dance. At first, people laughed. Then they stared. Then they grew afraid. Because she didn't stop. Hours passed. Then days. Her feet bled. Her body collapsed and rose again. Within a week, dozens joined her. Then hundreds. Women. Children. They danced in silence. Some screaming. Some convulsed, some dancing until they died. City officials documented everything. Doctors examined victims. Priests performed exorcisms. And no one could explain it. They called it the dancing plague. And here's the part historians can't agree on. Was it mass hysteria, or something far darker? Ergot poisoning from contaminated bread has been suggested, but ergot causes paralysis, not coordinated movement. Religious mania? Possibly, but why now? And why here? No explanation fits every symptom. And the records stop as abruptly as the dancing did. As if the city collectively decided not to talk about it anymore. But Strasbourg is not alone. Centuries earlier, Roman historians recorded a different kind of impossibility, one that challenged not the human body, but the sky itself. In 74 BCE, during the Mithridatic Wars, Roman soldiers reportedly watched two silver shields collide in the sky. Not comets. Not clouds. Shields. The historian Plutarch described them clearly, spinning, flashing, clashing like weapons before separating and vanishing. The soldiers believed it was a divine warning. Modern scholars struggle even to categorize it. Meteorological event? No known formation behaves that way. Astronomical illusion? Then why was it witnessed by entire legions? The official Roman response wasn't panic, it was ritual. Sacrifices were offered. Campaign plans changed. And then, silence. Which raises a chilling question. What happens when history records something, but refuses to explain it? Sometimes, the mystery isn't an event, it's a person. In medieval England, chroniclers describe children appearing in the village of Woolpit with green skin. They spoke no recognizable language. They refused bread, surviving only on beans. And when they finally learned English, they described coming from a land where the sun never shone. Today, historians debate everything from malnutrition to folklore. But the account wasn't written as a fairy tale. It was included in serious chronicles by William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall, men known for skepticism, which means someone believed it was real, enough to write it down, enough to preserve it. And if historians can't explain strange people, what about entire armies? Because in the year 53 BCE, one of Rome's greatest legions marched east and disappeared. The lost legion of Crassus vanished after defeat at Carrhae. No mass graves, no survivors, no definitive fate. Some Chinese records describe Roman-style soldiers years later, thousands of miles away. Were they prisoners? Mercenaries? Or is the connection coincidence? No proof has ever closed the case. And here's the unsettling pattern that emerges. When historical mysteries threaten to rewrite our understanding of the past, they are often debated, then softened, then quietly set aside. Not erased, just unresolved. And that brings us to the most dangerous phase of any mystery. When evidence starts piling up, and the questions become impossible to ignore. Up to this point, every mystery we've explored has shared one unsettling trait. It could be explained away. Mass hysteria. Symbolic language, lost records, misinterpretation, not satisfying, but possible. But now, we enter a category of mystery that historians find far more uncomfortable. Physical objects. Because ideas can be misunderstood. Stories can be exaggerated. But objects? Objects don't lie. They sit in museums. They can be weighed, measured, and some of them, quite simply, should not exist. Let's begin with a discovery made in 1936, in London. During routine renovations of a house in the suburb of Hammersmith, workers uncovered something embedded in ancient rock layers. A hammer, not a stone tool, not primitive, an iron and wood hammer, structurally identical to 19th century tools. The rock encasing it was later dated to hundreds of millions of years old. Too old for humans. Too old for ironworking. Too old for anything we recognize. Known today as the London Hammer, it has been dismissed, defended, and debated for decades. Some say it's contamination. Others argue rapid mineralization. But no explanation has fully accounted for all the evidence. And if one object can defy the timeline, what happens when there are dozens? Across the world, similar anomalies appear. In South Africa, miners discovered metallic spheres with precise grooves, found in rock dated over 2 billion years old. No known natural process creates perfect symmetry like that. In Baghdad, archaeologists uncovered clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods. When reconstructed, they produced a small electric charge. They're now known as the Baghdad batteries. Electricity, centuries before we believed it was discovered. Were they medical tools? Religious objects? Or something else entirely? No ancient text describes their purpose. Which is exactly the problem. Because when artifacts exist without explanation, they suggest not ignorance, but lost knowledge. And if knowledge can be lost once, what else might we have forgotten? If strange objects suggest lost technology, then impossible knowledge suggests something even more disturbing. Because knowledge doesn't just appear. It's built, tested, refined. Which means when ancient texts describe ideas centuries, sometimes millennia, ahead of their time, historians are forced into uncomfortable territory. Let's begin in ancient Greece. Around the 3rd century BCE, a man named Aristarchus of Samos proposed something radical. He claimed the earth moved around the sun. Not symbolically. Not philosophically. Literally. This was not a poetic metaphor, it was a mathematical model. And then, it disappeared. For nearly 2,000 years, humanity returned to a geocentric universe, with Earth at the center, until Copernicus rediscovered the idea in the 16th century. But Aristarchus got there first. So why didn't it change history? Because knowledge can be ignored, and sometimes, deliberately buried. And Aristarchus wasn't alone. In ancient India, Mathematical texts like the Surya Siddhanta described planetary diameters, orbital periods, and eclipse calculations with shocking accuracy. Some estimates differ from modern values by less than 1%. These texts predate European astronomy by centuries. Yet they rarely appear in mainstream historical narratives. But translation barriers? Colonial bias? Or something else? Then there's China. During the Han Dynasty, records describe seismographs capable of detecting distant earthquakes without modern sensors. Zhang Heng's device didn't predict quakes, it detected them hundreds of miles away. The technology was real. The design was recorded. And yet, the method was lost. Which leads to a terrifying possibility. What if ancient societies weren't primitive, but fragile? What if progress didn't move forward in a straight line, but surged, collapsed, and surged again? Because if knowledge can be gained, and then lost, then the past may have been far more advanced than we're comfortable admitting. And if that's true, what else might have existed, only to vanish without a trace? If impossible objects challenge our timelines, and advanced knowledge challenges our assumptions, then disappearances challenge something even deeper. They challenge our belief that societies collapse slowly, predictably, leaving clues behind. Because some disappearances leave nothing. No final battle. No famine layer. No mass graves. Just absence. Let's start in the heart of the Pacific Ocean. For centuries, Easter Island puzzled explorers. Thousands of massive stone statues, the moai, carved, transported, and erected without metal tools, wheels, or large animals. Some weigh over 80 tons. The island had once been forested, then suddenly it wasn't. By the time Europeans arrived, the society that built the statues was already in collapse. Traditional explanation? Environmental suicide. The people cut down all the trees, destroyed their ecosystem, and doomed themselves. But recent archaeological evidence complicates that story. Pollen records suggest the decline wasn't sudden. Tool marks indicate statues were still being moved later than expected. And rats, not humans, may have caused massive deforestation by eating seeds. So why did the society fall apart so completely? And why do oral histories suggest conflict triggered by something unexpected? And Easter Island is not alone. In the deserts of the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans built cities into cliffs. Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, complex road systems, astronomical alignments, trade networks spanning hundreds of miles. Then, around the 13th century, they left. Homes abandoned mid-use. Cooking pots left behind. Tools untouched. No evidence of invasion. No signs of catastrophic drought severe enough to explain total abandonment. The people didn't die there. They walked away. For what? Climate stress is often cited, but neighboring cultures survived the same conditions. Which suggests something else was happening. Something specific. Something that made staying impossible. And then there's the disappearance that still unsettles archaeologists the most. The Indus Valley Civilization. At its peak, it rivaled Egypt and Mesopotamia. Planned cities. Advanced drainage systems. Standardized bricks. Complex trade. And yet, no palaces. No temples. No kings. Then slowly, the cities emptied. Not destroyed. Not burned. Just abandoned. There are no epic collapse stories. No invasion layers. No clear cause. Even worse, their writing system remains undeciphered. Which means the people who could explain what happened left us no voice. And when civilizations vanish without explanation, it raises a question historians rarely ask out loud. What if some collapses weren't accidents, but responses? Responses to threats we no longer recognize? Because the next chapter in our story isn't about disappearance. It's about the moment when history itself turns and reveals that something went very wrong. Up until now, each mystery has felt isolated. A strange object here. A vanished city there. A piece of knowledge ahead of its time. Easy to separate. Easy to compartmentalize. But somewhere around the middle of the 20th century, historians began to notice something unsettling. A pattern. Not in location, Not in culture, but in behavior. Across different continents, across different centuries, the same sequence kept repeating. A civilization reaches a level of complexity. It displays advanced organization or knowledge. Then abruptly, something changes. Not always violently, not always visibly, but decisively. And the first crack in the academic wall came from an unlikely place. In Greenland and Antarctica, scientists drilling ice cores expected to find climate data. They did, but they also found something else. Sudden spikes in atmospheric particles, evidence of massive environmental disturbances, appearing globally and simultaneously. Events too abrupt to be gradual climate change. Some dated to periods matching major societal collapses. Volcanic eruptions explain some, but not all. And the unexplained ones line up disturbingly well with moments of historical disruption. Then came tree rings. Trees record stress year by year. And across multiple regions, tree ring data shows synchronized growth failures, sudden, short-lived, devastating events. Not local, global. Which leads us to a theory historians once dismissed outright. The idea that humanity has experienced periodic catastrophes, rare, sudden events capable of resetting civilizations. Not constant, not predictable, but powerful enough to erase progress. Comet impacts, solar flares, atmospheric events. The controversial Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests a cosmic event around 12,800 years ago triggered abrupt cooling, massive fires, and megafauna extinction. And here's the unsettling part. Some archaeological sites show signs of advanced human activity before that event, which would mean civilization may be far older and more fragile than we thought. And if civilization has been reset before, then the mysteries we struggle to explain may not be anomalies at all. They may be survivors. Survivors of knowledge that didn't make it through the last collapse. This would explain impossible artifacts, advanced ancient science, sudden abandonments, not as coincidences, but as remnants. And suddenly the question changes. It's no longer, why don't these things fit history? It becomes, what kind of history would make them fit? But this is where things get uncomfortable. Because once historians consider this possibility, they face a terrifying implication. If civilizations can collapse globally, then ours isn't immune. And the next mystery on our list doesn't come from ancient ruins. It comes from a moment when humanity almost didn't survive. If everything we've discussed so far has felt distant, this mystery does not. Because it happened close enough to modern times that human memory almost overlaps with it. And for a brief moment, according to scientists, historians, and governments, civilization came frighteningly close to ending. In the year 536 CE, the world went dark. Literally. Contemporary writers across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia described a sun that gave no light. A sky shrouded in haze. Summers without warmth. Crops that failed year after year. The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote that the sun shone, like the moon, without rays, for over a year. Chinese chronicles recorded summer snowfall. Irish annals described famines so severe it emptied entire regions. Modern science now confirms it. Ice cores show massive volcanic eruptions, possibly multiple, injecting ash into the atmosphere. But the scale was unprecedented. Temperatures dropped globally. Harvests collapsed. Trade networks shattered. This wasn't a regional disaster. It was a planetary crisis. And here's the chilling part. The year 536 wasn't a one-off. The cold lingered for over a decade. Plagues followed. Empires weakened. Populations collapsed. Some historians now call it the worst year to be alive. And right on its heels came something even more devastating. The Justinian Plague, one of the deadliest pandemics in history. It may have killed up to half the population of the Eastern Roman Empire. Cities emptied. Armies dissolved. Entire regions fell silent. The Roman world never fully recovered. And if that sounds familiar, it should. Because this wasn't the first time a sudden environmental catastrophe reshaped civilization. And it wouldn't be the last. The Black Death, the Little Ice Age, the collapse of the Maya. Each followed a similar pattern. Environmental shock, social breakdown, loss of knowledge. Which brings us to the most disturbing realization of all. Many of the mysteries we've discussed, lost technologies, vanished cities, unexplained abandonments, cluster around periods of crisis. Moments when survival mattered more than record-keeping. When knowledge was sacrificed for food. When art was traded for shelter. When writing simply stopped. And suddenly, the past looks less mysterious. And more tragic. Because maybe those unanswered questions aren't unsolved. Maybe the people who knew the answers didn't survive long enough to pass them on. And if that's true, then history isn't a story of constant progress. It's a story of amnesia. Civilization forgets, dribbles, forgets again. And standing in the middle of that cycle is us. Which leads to the final question. If history nearly ended before, what stopped it? And could it happen again? When the dust finally settles, when the ice retreats, when the plagues burn themselves out, what remains isn't clarity. It's absence. The centuries following major collapses are often called Dark Ages, not because nothing happened, but because less was recorded. Libraries burned. Schools closed. Trade routes vanished. Knowledge didn't disappear all at once. It leaked away. Mathematics simplified. Engineering regressed. Languages fractured. And the mysteries we still debate today were born in that silence. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most lost knowledge wasn't destroyed by enemies. It was lost because no one had the luxury to care. Survival comes first. This explains why advanced Roman concrete recipes vanished. Why Greek mechanical engineering stalled. Why ancient medical techniques had to be rediscovered centuries later. The people who held that knowledge died. And no one replaced them. But not everything was forgotten. Some things survived. Distorted, symbolic, misunderstood. Flood stories across cultures. Sky gods bringing fire. Golden ages followed by catastrophe. For centuries, historians dismissed these as imagination. Now, they look more like memory fragments. And this is where the historical mysteries take on a new meaning. They're not evidence of aliens. Not proof of magic. They're scars. Scars left by collapse. The Antikythera mechanism isn't proof of impossible technology. It's proof that brilliance can vanish. The Indus script isn't unreadable because we're stupid. It's unreadable because no bilingual text survived. The Baghdad batteries aren't proof of lost electricity grids. They're proof that experimentation existed outside our expected timeline. History didn't hide these things. History failed to protect them. And when we look at our own world, global trade, centralized knowledge, digital records, we should feel uneasy. Because for the first time in history, humanity knows exactly how fragile it is. We know how climate shifts collapse systems. We know how pandemics spread. We know how quickly supply chains break. Which makes the final resolution of these mysteries deeply ironic. They aren't warnings from the past. They're mirrors. And they ask the same question over and over. What will we leave behind? Someone will dig through our ruins too. In the modern world, we like to believe we're different. Smarter. Safer. Prepared. We have satellites watching the sky. Sensors tracking the earth. Databases storing human knowledge in the cloud. And yet, the same forces that erased the past are still here. Climate volatility. Geological instability. Biological threats. The difference is not immunity. It's awareness. And that awareness changes how historians now approach ancient mysteries. Instead of asking, how could this have existed? They're asking, what conditions made this possible, and what ended it? Interdisciplinary research has replaced single narratives. Archaeology meets climate science. History meets data modeling. Myth meets geology. And the result is humbling. Civilization is not a ladder. It's a balancing act. Advanced societies can fall faster than simple ones, because complexity creates dependency. Which means the greatest lesson hidden inside these mysteries isn't about the past at all. It's about resilience. And here's the modern twist. We are now uncovering more historical mysteries than ever before, not because there are more of them, but because we finally have the tools to see patterns. Ice cores, genetic analysis, satellite archaeology. Each discovery doesn't solve the mystery. It reframes it. And maybe that's the point. Because history isn't supposed to give us comfort. It's supposed to give us context. And context reminds us of one thing above all else. Nothing is permanent. If these stories unsettled you, because history isn't meant to make us comfortable. It's meant to make us aware. Every mystery you've heard tonight, every lost city, unexplained object, vanished civilization, is a reminder that the past is not finished speaking. We just have to listen carefully. If you want more deep dives like this, long-form stories where history slows down, breathes, and reveals what textbooks rush past, then make sure you stay connected to this channel. Because there are hundreds of unanswered questions still waiting. And in the next episode, we'll explore the single historical event that may have erased an entire chapter of human progress, an event so disruptive that its aftermath shaped myths, religions, and power structures for thousands of years. An event that may explain why humanity remembers floods, fires, and gods from the sky, across every culture on Earth. And once you see the evidence, you may never look at ancient history the same way again. History doesn't end with a revelation. It ends with a pause. A moment where the noise fades. And what's left is the weight of what we don't know. Because for every mystery we solve, two more appear. The Antikythera mechanism still ticks silently behind museum glass. The Indus script still refuses to speak. The lost cities remain, waiting. Not for us to find them, but for us to understand them. And maybe that's the final mystery. Not what the past was, but why we're so desperate to believe it was simpler than it really was. Civilizations rise. They innovate. They forget. They fall. And somewhere in the ruins of the next collapse, someone will ask the same questions we do now. Who were they? What did they know? And how did it all disappear? The answers won't come easily. They never do. Because history doesn't shout. It whispers. And only those willing to sit in the silence ever hear it speak.